Thank you, Sanjay, for the introduction. So my research is enabling future home adaptations for people living at home with dementia, where I am developing inclusive design for Dementia Standards for the UK. So what is dementia? Dementia is an umbrella term for several diseases that affect the brain. It is a progressive disease, and there is no cure. The World Health Organization estimates that there are more than 55 million people worldwide diagnosed with a form of dementia, and within that figure, 944,000 people are in the UK, and that number is expected to reach 1 million before the end of 2025, so not long from now. The increased prevalence of dementia and a preference to age at home rather than in a care setting means that the design of homes need to support people living with dementia. A systematic literature review found extensive research for the design of care homes and specialist dementia facilities. However, there's much less research on the inclusive design of the home environment for people with dementia. So within the current building regulations for England, we have Part M, which addresses access to and use of buildings, and it also is accompanying document, which is the approved document M, which lists ways or methods and how to meet the legal requirements of Part M. 5 minutes isn't long enough to discuss all of the intricacies of Part M, so I'm not going to put you through all that jargon. But here's a hierarchical organization of the approved document M Volume 1, which addresses dwellings or mainstream housing. So if you can see here on the left-hand side, we have Category 1, which addresses visitable dwellings. As you can see, there is a lot of scope for self-interpretation and not a lot of information to address dementia nor any cognitive health condition. However, that is the minimum standard. That is what all homes in England, all new build homes in England are currently being built to. Unless you're purchasing a home in London, in which case you get Category 2, which is an optional requirement, and a little bit more information there. And then Category 3, which is also an optional requirement, but that addresses wheelchair user dwellings. What this PhD research aims to address is the lack of a building standard for mainstream housing in designing for dementia in the UK. It will review the current building standards and guidance and then develop a proposed inclusive design standard for new build homes in the UK to support future adaptations for people with dementia, which has been named the Inclusive Design for Dementia Standards, so IDDS. I took a qualitative approach to carry out my research, which took place over 4 studies. Study 1 interviews were conducted with 3 cohorts of professionals. The cohort 1 are those in the housing industry, so that's architects, house builders at the regional and corporate levels, local planning authority planners, building control, and access consultants. Cohort 2 consists of occupational therapists and specialist dementia nurses. So these are professionals working with people with dementia in their own homes. And then cohort 3 participants are technical standards officials. So study 2 interviews were carried out with retired age people in their own homes. Study 3 interviews were carried out with people with dementia, again, living in their own homes. And we discussed adaptations and changes that they have carried out in their own homes to assist and maintain their independence. The data were analyzed using in vivo and summarization using the framework method to identify themes and to extract recommendations to apply to the development of the IDDS. And then study 4 is where the draft standard, so IDDS version 1.0, is currently being reviewed by stakeholders as we speak. So what has the research identified so far? Study 1 identified provisions of home design and adaptations for inclusion in the IDDS. So, for example, the main entry access needs to be addressed, as well as a provision of a ground floor bathrooms. Study 2 identified 2 further areas requiring adaptation to support an aging population. So, again, to address the stairs and a provision of a ground floor toilet, and or the option and the flexibility to adapt an existing layout to install a level access shower or convert the space into a wet room with space to accommodate a second person or a carer to assist. And then study 3 identified requirements for main entry level access, as well as wider entrance halls, again addressing stairs and the flexibility to integrate a bedroom on the ground floor. So to develop the first draft of IDDS, I used the approved document M, volume 1 as the base document, and then applied the thematic analysis results from the literature review, as well as the results from study 1 interviews, study 2 interviews, and study 3 interviews. So as I mentioned previously, version 1 is currently being reviewed by stakeholders. And one thing I wanted to add is that when I started this PhD in 2021, the UK government department responsible for Part M had just begun a review and evaluation of Part M. They're very aware of this research. The principal architect responsible for Part M has been following my work, so I have plans to keep this conversation flowing when the PhD research finishes. And this concludes my presentation. I leave you with a photo of my beloved aunt, who was diagnosed with advanced stage Alzheimer's shortly after I began the PhD. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Great talk. Any questions? Oh, we have one here.
You mentioned that there's extensive research about care homes and hospital design. Mm-hmm. What can we learn from that research and apply to homes?
Well, that's one of the questions that came up in the literature review, and in speaking with care home workers and special voice there, that the layout of the home, things that could be brought forward to prepare. I mean, you can't plan for the eventuality of someone has to go into care home as a result of dementia, but layouts of the kitchen and the overall ground floor layout to prevent wandering. So with care homes and precious dementia facilities, they tend to design it like a hotel layout, long corridors and whatnot. And that's one of the things that they're trying to move away from, and they would like home design to avoid the long hallways and dead ends. Definitely no dead ends. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Thanks for a really interesting presentation. 2 quick queries from me. You mentioned in relation to Part M that the second option is currently been implemented in London. And if that's the case, why is it the case?
That's one of the questions I've constantly asked all the professionals during my study 1. Why is Category 2 only in London? So London tends to be the test bed.
Okay.
So there is actually, as part of Part M's evaluation and review, the industry are campaigning that Category 2 would become the new minimum standard. There's nothing stopping the housing industry to design and build homes beyond the minimum standards, but my personal opinion is that house builders, they want to keep costs down, so minimum standards is the cheapest option.
My second quick question relates to the detail that you gave about your various studies, and I think both in Study 2 and Study 3 you talked about undertaking walking interviews.
Yes.
And I wondered what they were.
Okay, yeah. So the interviews with people in their own homes, and what I do is, because everyone's inviting me into their home, they don't know who I am, so I offer to bring cake, homemade cake. So I've done a lot of baking during this PhD. And I enjoy baking, but it's been really difficult for my teenage children to come home from school and see cake that's not for them. But, so we have the interviews, we have cake, we have coffee, and I just go through all the questions. And then usually that's enough to break the ice and feel comfortable with me. So then we carry on with the interview. They give me a tour of their home. And during the walking interviews is when a lot of information they share during the formal aspect of the interview gets reinforced. During the walking interview, they might have forgotten to mention something during the formal aspect, and they say, oh yes, I didn't mention this. And it's also an opportunity to also take photos, and the participants are there as well they have a say on the photos, and I show them all the photos, so anything that they're not happy with, I delete it, straight away. So, yeah.
So during that walking phase, are you continuing to record or take notes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? I think we had one here.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for the extensive and fascinating work. I was wondering if your research is the application of this design standard that you came up with is the design of the new environments or the adaptations or both of them?
Both of them. So using the approved document M Volume 1, it addresses new builds, extensions, adaptations is not included in there. So with the new inclusive design standards, if you design the space so that in the future it could take an adaptation. So that's one of the aims of my standards.
So as a follow-up, in your, you mentioned the walking interviews with the people. How, in your experience, how did they feel to make adaptations to their homes? Because there has been a research done in the University of Stirling about the same subject, and they found that the people with dementia are quite reluctant to any changes to their living environments because they're used to that place.
Yeah.
And
so that's one of the strong points about with people keeping them in their home because they have that familiarity, and yes, introducing changes can be dramatic for them. You have to introduce them slowly, different changes. So one of the reasons I was interviewing retired age people who are not diagnosed with dementia as part of aging, what changes have they made to, it's sort of to build a timeline, if they're building adaptations. They did this earlier, as soon as they retired, and then eventually, if they developed a form of dementia later on, how would that adaptation help them? And they don't, and most of the time, they don't even realize the benefits of the adaptation because they've gotten used to it. So, yeah, so it's kind of trying to determine which adaptations come in earlier that would benefit someone with dementia later on in life.
thank you.
I think that's all the questions we have time for, but thank you very much.